In a town steeped in prejudice, a 10-year-old black girl scavenges for survival. One night on the last bus she encounters a distinguished white man, robbed and stranded. No one helps, not even the driver. With her last few dollars she pays for them both. Unbeknownst to her, he's a wealthy CO, and her simple act of kindness will transform both their lives forever. Before we dive into this tale, tell us where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your thoughts. The aroma of fried delicacies and spun sugar hung in the crisp morning air of Mapleton, a small town nestled amidst rolling hills and tranquil neighborhoods. Life here seemed idyllic, at least for some. Vibrant flags fluttered above market stalls as families ambled down the main street, their laughter echoing, their money flowing freely as if an endless supply. The annual spring fair had returned, morphing the usually sleepy town into a bustling, vibrant carnival of balloons, melodies, and beaming faces. Yet beneath the cheerful veneer, a colder truth persisted. Hushed whispers, sidelong glances, and an invisible barrier that never truly vanished in places like this. It was the stark division between who belonged and who was merely tolerated. They noticed her the instant she stepped off the curb, pulling a faded gray trash bag nearly half her size. A young black girl, barely 10, slender, with dark curls tied back in a tight bun, her clothes so worn the edges frayed. Her old sneakers scuffed the pavement as she moved, head down, eyes sharp, careful to avoid eye contact. The bag behind her softly rattled, plastic bottles, aluminum cans, remnants of others' good times. People shifted as she passed. A woman in a floral dress wrinkled her nose, pulling her toddler away. A group of teenage boys in varsity jackets chuckled quietly. "Look, Riverstone trash in town," one mumbled, making no effort to conceal his disdain. Riverstone, the neighboring town, was known as home to most of the black residents. In Mapleton, even a child could sense the unspoken divide. Amara didn't flinch. She was accustomed to it. The stares, the whispers, the thinly veiled revulsion. She wasn't here for friendship. She was here for the discards. The empty soda bottles, crumpled beer cans, forgotten plastic beneath benches and near food stalls. Their junk, her few coins. The fair pulsed around her, bright and noisy. Kids zipped by with balloons. Couples posed for selfies by the Ferris wheel. Vendors called out deals on funnel cakes and lemonade. But wherever Amara walked, space opened up around her like the sea parting, not from respect, but from discomfort, fear, even contempt. Even other black people at the fair kept their distance, eyes downcast, afraid to be associated with her. The girl with the bag, the girl from Riverstone, the insignificant nobody with nothing. As the sun dipped behind Mapleton's white-painted rooftops, the fair slowly unwound. Booths closed, music faded, crowds thinned. Amara wiped her brow, glancing at her nearly full bag of recyclables. Not bad for a day's work. Enough perhaps for some bread. She slipped through an alley, hurrying toward the old bus stop at the edge of town. Streetlights flickered on as she approached the cracked bench, the faded map behind glass, the worn sign that read Riverstone, last stop. A few people were already waiting, shoppers with bags, tired faces, all sharing that unspoken agreement. Ignore the little black girl with the trash bag. Let her disappear into the shadows. Mar didn't mind. Shadows were safer than stairs. But that night she wasn't the only one on the fringe. At the far end of the bench sat a man, perhaps 50, white, in what had once been a crisp dress shirt, now rumpled and stained. His slacks were dusty, shoes scuffed, and graying hair clung to his forehead with sweat. He looked like he'd walked all day, maybe longer, his eyes tired, lost, darting around the street as if disoriented. The bus hissed around the corner, its headlights casting long shadows over the cracked sidewalk. The driver barely glanced at the man as the doors creaked open. "Well, you getting on or what?" the driver barked, his voice laced with the same disdain Amara had heard her entire life. But the man hesitated, his hand hovering near his empty pocket. His jaw clenched. Everyone else averted their eyes. No one offered help. No one ever did. And for the first time in a long while, Amara wasn't invisible. She was the one who saw it. The desperation, the shame, the silent plea hidden behind the man's silence. She reached into her jacket pocket, pulling out crumpled, torn bills. "Enough. I'll pay for him," she said, her voice small but unwavering. The driver raised an eyebrow, looked her up and down, and smirked. "Figures. You people stick together." His laugh was ugly, sharp. Amara's cheeks burned, but she held her ground. The bills trembled in her hand, but her gaze didn't waver. And with that, two outcasts, one small, one grown, boarded the bus, burdened by a town's quiet hatred. But fate had just begun its work. The old city bus rumbled down the cracked road like an exhausted beast, its engine coughing, metal joints groaning with every jolt and bump. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of old vinyl, cigarette smoke clinging to the seat cushions, and a lingering sourness from too many packed bodies over the years. The yellowed overhead lights flickered weakly, casting a dull glow over the faded seats and the worn floor, stained with forgotten spills. Amara kept her head down, making her way toward the back, her trash bag dragging, softly rattling with clinking bottles and cans. The man followed quietly, his shoulders hunched, his steps slow and uncertain, like someone walking through an unwanted memory. The driver, a heavy-set man with a patchy beard and an oversized uniform shirt, watched them in the mirror as they settled into their seats. His smirk remained, that sharp edge of contempt still curling at the corners of his mouth. He didn't say another word, but he didn't need to. It was all there. The look, the shrug, the way he mashed the gas pedal a little too hard as the bus jerked forward, jostling Amara slightly. The other passengers barely looked at them. A woman near the front clutched her shopping bags closer. A man in work boots and a ball cap pretended to sleep but kept sneaking glances toward the back. No one spoke, but the message was crystal clear. You don't belong here. Neither of you. Stay quiet. Stay invisible. Amara pressed herself against the window, the cold glass grounding her. Outside, the town blurred past in streaks of neon signs, shuttered storefronts and rows of old, sagging houses. Streetlights flickered overhead, their glow hazy in the thick night air. Her reflection stared back, small dark eyes beneath tight curls, a faint smudge of dirt on her cheekbone, lips pressed together in quiet defiance. 10 years old, and already she understood this world better than most adults ever would. The man sat across the aisle, his eyes fixed on the floor, hands resting awkwardly in his lap. His expensive shirt, now wrinkled and stained, looked out of place here. His leather shoes were scuffed, one lace frayed. But it wasn't the clothes that gave him away. It was the way he carried himself, or rather used to. The broad shoulders now slightly slumped, the tight jaw, the way his eyes flicked toward the other passengers, calculating, uncertain. He wasn't from this side of life, not usually. But tonight he was as much a ghost as she was. For a while neither spoke. The bus rattled over potholes, brakes screeching at every intersection. Amara counted the stops, her small fingers tightening around the strap of her trash bag. Each time the doors hissed open, more people got off, a few new ones got on, but no one ever sat near them. Finally, curiosity chipped away at her caution. She turned slightly in her seat, her voice quiet but steady. You didn't have money, she stated, not really a question, more an observation hanging in the stale air. The man looked up, surprised, his blue eyes meeting hers for the first time. There was something raw behind them. Exhaustion, maybe shame, but not the hard, dismissive look she was used to from men like him. He hesitated before answering, his voice rough as if unused all day. No, I didn't. His lips pressed together for a moment before he added, almost to himself, not anymore. Amara tilted her head, studying him. You look like you did, she said bluntly, her eyes drifting over the stained shirt, the pricey watch still clinging to his wrist, scratched but intact. What happened? Somebody rob you? The man gave a dry, humorless laugh, running a hand over his face. Something like that. His fingers trembled slightly just for a second before he shoved them into his pockets, hiding the tremor. Guess you could say I wasn't paying attention. Got careless. Amara nodded, the ghost of understanding flickering across her face. Happens. They fell silent again as the bus rolled through the dark outskirts of Mapleton, the streetlights thinning, giving way to stretches of cracked pavement and shuttered gas stations. The hum of the engine, the occasional cough from the driver, the rattle of loose windows, it all blurred together in a monotonous soundtrack of forgotten spaces. The man leaned his head back against the seat, eyes drifting to the ceiling, but his mind wasn't resting. His gaze flicked down to the girl across from him, the small wiry frame curled protectively around the trash bag, the sharp eyes beneath thick lashes, the quiet but undeniable defiance etched into every inch of her. She couldn't have been more than 10, yet she moved like someone twice that age. No fear, no trust, just constant calculation. The same way he'd learned to move today. "Why'd you do it?" he asked, finally breaking the quiet. His voice was low, cautious, as if unsure he deserved to ask. "Why'd you pay for me?" Amara's eyes met his, steady and unflinching. She shrugged one small shoulder. "Ain't nobody else gonna do it." Her tone wasn't bitter, just matter-of-fact, like the sky was blue, people were cruel, and that's just how it was. "Figured you know what that feels like." The man let out a slow breath, eyes dropping to the floor. Yeah, I knew." For the first time in a long time, maybe more than he cared to admit. The bus shuddered to a stop. Another passenger got off. The street outside was nearly deserted now, run-down houses, boarded windows, chain-link fences leaning at awkward angles. They were getting close to the end of the line. "You from Riverstone?" he asked quietly, though the answer was obvious. Amara nodded. "Born there. Guess I'll probably die there too." She said it so plainly it made something twist sharp in his chest. "You don't sound too sure about that," he remarked, watching her. She paused, eyes narrowing just a touch. "Ain't sure about nothing except people don't like seeing folks like me around here." Her fingers tapped the trash bag softly. "But they sure like leaving enough garbage behind." The corner of the man's mouth twitched. It wasn't exactly a smile, but it was close. He didn't say anything else. Neither did she. The bus lurched forward again, the last few stops ticking by like a slow countdown. The man stared out the window, his reflection faint against the glass, the faded streetlights blurring past. His mind drifted, heavy with exhaustion, with questions, with a sting of humiliation still fresh in his chest. But through it all, that small voice, that defiant shrug, that handful of crumpled bills from a kid who had nothing, kept echoing louder than the engine ever could. And for the first time in years, Richard Evans didn't know where this ride was taking him, but he knew it wasn't over yet. The bus hissed as it pulled into the final stop, the brakes screeching with a tired groan, as if even the machine was fed up with the weight it carried. Outside, the streets stretched quiet and dark, streetlights buzzing faintly, their flickering glow casting uneven patches of light onto cracked pavement. Faded signs pointed down narrow streets. Apartment buildings leaned tiredly against the night sky, their windows dim, their brick walls stained with age. Riverstone. The kind of place you only heard about on the news. Poverty, crime, everything those perfect little towns across the highway pretended didn't exist. Amara was already on her feet, her small hand gripping the strap of her overstuffed trash bag, sneakers squeaking faintly as she made her way down the aisle. The driver didn't look at her. The other passengers barely noticed. She was part of the scenery, trash girl, the kid from the wrong side of everything. She hopped down the steps with the ease of someone used to disappearing into the night. Richard hesitated, his hand hovering over the back of the seat in front of him. The driver's voice cracked through the silence, sharp, impatient. "End of the line, man. Let's go." That same tone, the same simmering disrespect he'd spat at the girl, now aimed at him. It burrowed under Richard's skin like a splinter. But this time he had no defense. No suit, no polished words, no corporate title hanging over him like armor. Tonight, stripped of all that, he was just another nobody being shuffled off to nowhere. He stepped off the bus, the doors hissing shut behind him as if they couldn't wait to be rid of him. The air outside was thick with humidity and faint cigarette smoke, the kind that clung to your clothes and refused to leave. The buildings around him loomed, windows dark, paint peeling, the streets cracked and littered with forgotten scraps of life. His shoes clicked softly against the pavement as he looked around, disoriented, unmoored. Ahead, under the dim streetlight, Amara's small figure drifted down the sidewalk, her trash bag bouncing lightly behind her. For a moment she seemed impossibly small against the heavy shadows of the street, her shoulders squared, head high, step steady. No hesitation, no fear, just quiet resolve, like she'd walked these streets 100 nights before. Richard watched her for a moment longer than he meant to, something unfamiliar tightening in his chest. The weight of the day, the robbery, the bus ride, the humiliation, pressed down harder now, mixing with the gnawing unease creeping up his spine. He had always known, in some abstract, distant way, that places like this existed. But standing here, breathing it in, stripped of his status and shield, it wasn't distant anymore. It was suffocatingly real. He turned in the opposite direction, hands shoved deep in his pockets, shoes crunching over loose gravel as he started walking. The further he got from the bus stop, the more the streets changed. The cheap apartment buildings gave way to warehouses, then empty parking lots, then wide, empty intersections where even the streetlights flickered out entirely. He walked for blocks, his mind heavy, his chest hollow, until finally the world began to shift again. The sidewalks got cleaner. Storefronts appeared, first boarded up, then open, neon signs humming quietly. The buildings grew taller, glassier, more expensive. He passed late-night coffee shops where baristas packed up for closing, pedestrians in tailored coats, the faint hum of expensive cars sliding by. The forgotten edges of the city fell behind him, replaced by the polished heart of downtown, the heart he ruled or used to. The glass doors of his building slid open. The concierge's eyes widened, surprise flashing across his face before he quickly masked it. Richard didn't stop, didn't explain. He rode the elevator to the top floor in silence, the hum of the machinery a soft, sterile contrast to the chaos of the streets he'd just left. His penthouse was exactly as he left it, immaculate, spacious, cold. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city skyline like a photograph. The polished kitchen gleamed, the leather furniture sat untouched. It was everything he'd built, everything he'd convinced himself mattered. And tonight it felt utterly empty. Richard sank into the wide chair by the window, elbows on his knees, hands steepled under his chin. His eyes drifted over the glittering towers, the neat rows of streetlights, the distant hum of a city that kept moving with or without him. His reflection in the glass stared back. Creased shirt, dirt-stained slacks, tired eyes. It wasn't the lost wallet or the stolen phone that hollowed him out tonight. It wasn't even the smug bus driver or the indifferent stares. It was the way they all looked through him, ignored him, reduced him to nothing more than an inconvenience, a problem, background noise. For the first time in years, Richard Evans knew what it felt like to not belong, to be unseen, unwanted. And yet, amid all that, there was her. Amara's face lingered in his mind, the guarded eyes, the sharp edges of her small frame, the quiet defiance wrapped in worn-out clothes, the way she'd stood there, pulling crumpled bills from her pocket, handing them over like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. No hesitation, no pity, just action. He closed his eyes, her words looping in his ears. Ain't nobody else gonna do it. 10 years old, with less than nothing to her name, and still when everyone else turned away, she'd stepped forward. Richard exhaled, long and heavy, the weight of his pride, his status, his carefully curated life pressing against his ribs like stone. He opened his eyes again, the city lights glittering below, bright and blinding. But suddenly, for the first time, the polished skyline felt more like a cage than a crown. And for the first time he wondered what it would take to change that. The street outside the humble abode still smelled of old oil and stale cigarettes, the faint buzz of neon signs battling against the pale morning light. Amara hoisted her bag of plastic bottles higher on her shoulder, her small frame hunched under its weight, sneakers scuffing the cracked sidewalk. The heavy air carried that same familiar mix of exhaustion and quiet resignation that clung to every corner of Riverstone. She barely noticed the sleek black sedan that rolled to a slow stop behind her. It wasn't until the door opened and footsteps approached, steady, purposeful, unfamiliar for these streets, that she turned, eyes narrowing. Richard Evans stood there, clean, sharp, utterly out of place. His pressed navy coat, polished shoes, even the faint scent of expensive cologne, it all screamed of another world. But his eyes, they weren't polished, not today. They held something raw, unsettled, as if he hadn't slept since their last encounter. Amara stiffened, her grip tightening on the bag. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was sharp, cautious, like a cornered cat ready to bolt. Richard hesitated only a second before stepping closer, hands open, his voice steady but quiet. "I wanted to see you again." His eyes searched hers, heavy with something that wasn't pity, wasn't charity, just truth. "And I wanted to ask you something." Amara's jaw clenched. "I ain't got nothing worth asking about." Richard's lips pressed together for a moment, the faintest crack of frustration breaking through before he softened again. "You got more than you think." His gaze flicked to the bag of bottles, the frayed hem of her hoodie, the stubborn set of her shoulders. "You got more than most adults I know." She bristled at that, eyes narrowing further. "What, 'cause I picked up your sorry but last night when nobody else would?" Her chin tilted defiantly. "Don't mean you owe me nothing. I ain't stupid." Richard exhaled a slow, measured breath. No, you're not. He took another careful step closer, his voice lowering. Which is why I'm going to be straight with you. I don't just owe you, I respect you. He paused, then added, quiet but steady, and I want to help. Amara's laugh was small and sharp, like glass breaking underfoot. Help. She shook her head, curls bouncing slightly. Ain't nobody helping little black girls from Riverstone, not unless they want something. Her eyes flashed, cold, too old for her face. Ain't nobody that good. Richard's expression faltered for the briefest second, the weight of her words settling hard in his chest. But he didn't back down. I don't want anything from you. His voice cracked slightly as he added, but I owe it to you to try and be better. Amara's arms crossed over her chest, chin lifting, her small frame still radiating defiance. You don't get it. Her voice dropped, bitter low. There ain't no better for people like me. My mama told me that before she left. She said, don't trust no smiles. Don't trust no handouts. 'Cause this world don't love girls like me and folks like you. She motioned to him, to the polished coat, the clean shoes, the skin he wore like an unspoken shield. You don't care. You look right through us till you don't. Her words sliced clean through the morning haze, the accusation hanging heavy between them. Richard's throat tightened, his hands dropped to his sides as a bitter swell of shame crawled under his skin. He wasn't wrong, not completely. He'd spent years doing exactly that, walking past, looking through, never seeing. And then, without thinking, he stepped forward and pulled her into his arms. Amara stiffened instantly, muscles locking, her small fists curling against his chest. But Richard didn't flinch. His arms wrapped around her gently but firmly, the way a man who'd never known how to say the right thing chooses the only truth left, in action. I'm sorry, he whispered, the words raw, rough, pressed into her tangled curls. I'm sorry for this world. I'm sorry for every time someone looked away, for every time I looked away. Amara's shoulders twitched, her fists pressing harder against him, as if she wanted to shove him back but didn't know how. The fight in her was still there, coiled tight, but beneath it something cracked just for a second. Richard's voice dropped lower, nearly breaking. You shouldn't have to think like that. Not at 10. Not ever. His hand rested lightly on her back, his breath steady despite the tremor in his chest. I can't fix the whole world, kid, but I can start here. With you. For a long moment neither of them moved. The street noise carried on, a car honking in the distance, the low hum of a motorcycle growling past. But within that small space it was quiet, heavy, real. Finally, Amara shoved gently against his chest, just enough to break the contact. Her face tilted up, eyes shining, sharp and guarded all at once. You really believe that? Her voice cracked faintly. One person can fix any of this? Richard's smile was faint, tired but real. No, he shook his head slowly. But maybe they can fix themselves. She stared at him for a moment longer, the walls inside her rattling, the years of warnings, of hard lessons clawing to stay in place. But something small, fragile and impossibly stubborn flickered beneath the surface. She stepped back, arms crossed tight again, her expression unreadable. You talk nice, she muttered. But I ain't stupid. Richard nodded, the corner of his mouth twitching faintly. I'd expect nothing less. And as he stood there watching this tiny, fierce child turn away, dragging her trash bag behind her like a badge of survival, Richard Evans knew the hardest part wasn't convincing her. It was convincing himself that maybe this time he wouldn't look away. The grand ballroom glowed under soft golden light, crystal chandeliers sparkling like frozen stars suspended above a sea of polished shoes and designer dresses. Rows of tables lined the room, the crisp white linens and delicate flower arrangements a sharp contrast to the quiet heaviness that lingered beneath the surface. Waiters moved gracefully between chairs, the clink of silverware, the hum of conversation filling the space like background music in a world carefully curated to feel important. But tonight the walls of privilege weren't as thick as they used to be. Richard Evans stood near the podium at the front of the room, his tailored suit impeccable, his silver hair brushed neatly back. The faint lines at the corners of his eyes were deeper now, but not with exhaustion, with clarity. The weight of boardrooms and business deals had settled into something sharper, heavier, more personal over the past year. He adjusted the microphone, the soft murmur of the crowd quieting as heads turned, cameras flicked on, all eyes settling on him. But for once the attention didn't inflate his ego. It grounded him. His gaze drifted across the room to the long table near the stage where they sat, dozens of them. Children. Brown eyes, tight curls, small shoulders draped in clothes that actually fit for once. Some nervous, some wide-eyed, some holding hands beneath the table. Survivors of streets that weren't made for them. And right there at the center sat Amara. She looked different now, but not in the way clothes or fresh haircuts change a person. The defiance was still there in her posture, in the stubborn set of her jaw. But it was layered now with something else, confidence, a spark of safety, a future. Her hair was pulled back neatly, a simple blue dress hugging her small frame. But it wasn't the fabric or the polish that caught Richard's breath. It was the way she met his eyes without flinching, chin tilted slightly in challenge, like she still didn't entirely believe this world, but she wasn't afraid of it anymore either. The applause faded as Richard leaned into the mic, his voice steady but tinged with the rawness he hadn't fully shaken since that night at the bus stop a year ago. He began, his eyes never leaving her. I thought I understood success. Power. What it meant to make it. His lips curled faintly, almost bitter. But standing on top means nothing if you've convinced yourself you don't see what's happening down below. The room held its breath, the silence stretching wide. I was that man, Richard continued, voice lowering. I walked past the forgotten ones every day. Told myself it wasn't my fight. Believed comfort meant I was somehow separate, immune. His hands flexed lightly against the podium, the memory of that night still burned into his skin. Until a little girl with a trash bag full of bottles did what no amount of money or titles ever could. She saw me. And she helped me when I had nothing left. A ripple of quiet swept through the crowd as whispers circled. Some recognized the story from the news. The CO stranded, robbed, humbled by a stranger. But none of them had ever heard the real version. Richard's gaze swept the room, landing on the rows of children again, their small faces watching, some wide-eyed, some cautious. We tell ourselves children are the ones who need saving. But maybe it's us who needs saving from our own indifference. He took a slow breath, the rawness of the next words curling tightly in his chest. This foundation, Angel's Hope, it's not just charity. It's a promise. A reckoning. A refusal to keep walking past kids like these. Like Amara. He paused, letting the name hang in the air, then finished, and pretending they don't exist. At the mention of her name, all eyes shifted toward the table. Amara didn't shrink beneath the attention. Her eyes stayed locked on Richard, sharp, steady, a quiet challenge beneath the surface as if to say, you'd better mean every word. Richard smiled faintly, the corners of his mouth twitching with something warmer. Pride and maybe redemption. The applause rose, steady, sincere, rippling through the room like a small wave of overdue acknowledgement. Richard stepped back, shoulders settling, but his eyes never left Amara. Later, after handshakes and staged photographs, after donors sipped their wine and congratulated each other for their generosity, Richard found her standing near the balcony, away from the noise. The city stretched behind her in glittering lines of light, but her eyes were on him before he even spoke. You didn't run this time, he remarked softly, hands sliding into his pockets. Amara shrugged, that familiar, unbothered smirk tugging at her mouth. Hard to run in new shoes. She tilted her foot, the shiny black flats catching the light. Besides, I had pancakes to finish. Richard chuckled quietly, the memory of their first breakfast flickering behind his eyes. He sobered as he added, voice lowering, all of this, it doesn't fix everything. You were right. The world's still what it is. Amara's eyes softened, a quiet understanding slipping through the cracks of old defenses. Yeah. Her voice was low, almost tired for someone so young. But it's a start. They stood there for a long moment, the city humming below, the weight of the ballroom pressing behind them. And for the first time it didn't feel impossible. It felt earned. And as the night unfolded, as speeches gave way to music and cautious hope flickered across worn faces, Richard Evans understood something he never thought he would. Angels don't always have wings. Sometimes they carry trash bags. And sometimes they save you long before you ever think to save them. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.